The Trinka Podcast, academic writing done right. My name is Dr. KK, your host. In this episode of the podcast, you will listen to me speak with Gayatri Phadke from Enago Academy team about inclusivity in academia, the LGBTQIA plus perspective. This is the second part of our conversation. Oh, it's a loaded question. We could have an episode on this just itself, but let me try to. The way I have, I think a couple of points to sort of expand on. So one thing that you're talking about is the double-edged sword of
Right,
this exposure or the visibility that you're talking about, right? So
right.
on one hand, somebody like me wants to be recognized as me, who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about not just me, anybody in the community, LGBTQIA plus community.
Mm-hmm.
So because a lot of what we are things that that we need to belong in a society, right? Human beings need to be in a society. We are social animals, and a lot of that involves aspects that touch our gender orientation and sexual orientation and
Right,
identity, etc. Right? So when organizations just simply state that okay, we are aware that there is a, let's say, a subpopulation of LGBTQ. I'm talking about academia or corporate institutions or
yeah.
organizations like us. When they just say that okay, you are cool, as in you are just like anybody else, but that's where we are going to draw the line, and
Mm-hmm.
nothing more is there, and that makes it a difficult place to be in or work in,
Right,
etc. And that's constantly a thing that we also want. We, in the sense, as a community, I'm now talking on behalf of the community, we want to also be visible from that point of view. And the more that you make this visibility thing a priority in your organizational goals or institutional goals, the more comfortable the individuals are going to be. And I'm not
yeah.
asking institutions to have pride marches. That's different from
Right,
openly talking about these things and explicitly bringing up, issues related to marginalized sub communities, I would say.
absolutely.
And this is one such community. Once again, we are just not just talking about LGBTQI.
Yeah,
Any sub community that is potentially marginalized or feels marginalized is can be
yeah.
talked about in the same in the same way. So once you create that environment, then you have more people coming in to sort of to be faces of the activities and advocates, etc., etc. So I'm just now pivoting back to my experience, right? And I think
Right,
this might be because of a conversation that we might have had in the past. So in our organization, I've known several individuals who belong to the community, right? And the revelation of their status in itself is a tricky situation, right? They have, as in
right.
any individual has their right to reveal what they want to reveal. And once they do, then they become part of like a publicly acknowledged part of the community. So
Yeah,
as far as I know, the openly or at the organizational level, let's say visibility, somebody has chosen to announce themselves as belonging to the community. I do not know of too many people within our company, and that now puts a company in the backward in the sense. So we don't have too many people. We have allies, but we don't have
yeah,
people within the community who want to speak about it, even though there are
yeah.
people within the community. And that's a sort of balance that one needs to take. And I personally have been, I would say, disappointed in the fact that many people do not come up. And I often become the same, as in every, let's say, Pride month, I've been asked to sort of do something, and that's fine. I mean, I feel like I should do it, but our company is a big company, right? We have
Yeah,
offices across the continents, as in to connect into your initial academic experiences.
yeah.
So it cannot be just the one guy saying the same thing every year. It has
Right,
to be more than that guy. So from that point of view, we need more people, and they needn't be from the community, as I say. I mean, they can be allies, and we don't need to know what you are to for you to
right.
support a cause, right?
Yeah,
So from that point of view, you need that balance needs to be there, and I think some of the problems will be solved even at the, let's say, institute or a university. But if you put in the right measures for increasing the visibility, and you make a safe space, quote unquote safe space within the organizational space, for people to be and belong and do things, and again, not explicitly, like not a pride march every month, that's not this. Then you get more and more people feel comfortable to express themselves as who they are, and then you open up more opportunities and more options in terms of advocacy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things, like speaking from my personal experiences, I was much more vocal as an ally outside of India. Probably because I found my voice at a time when I was outside India. I am not sure that I even know the right platforms, let's say,
Right.
to be more vocal about being an ally. Of course, there are situations within the company events and whatever where I can participate and be an ally more visibly. But I think it's a balancing. You have to balance several things at the same time. Some people actually feel very uncomfortable disclosing that they are an ally or they are part of the community in a corporate culture, and at the same time, some people scoff at it because they feel in some ways that it's a corporate ploy. I'm not necessarily saying that's the case in Crimson, but there are several instances where people have felt exploited because of it, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of that plays into any person's decision about whether to be vocal, whether to be visible.
Yeah.
But to your point, it is absolutely necessary, because the more vocal you are and the more conversations you are having, the more other people are going to feel comfortable about disclosure, let's say.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting that, your experiences sort of highlight a need for, I guess, a more sustained conversation or a more regular conversation about, visibility, let's say, or just being vocal.
Right.
So
I have a couple of points here. As in, obviously, the last thing that you mentioned, that there should be more conversation, there should be more visibility to the conversation is there. That is a given, I suppose. As in, any social cause needs that. But I've been thinking about the other 2 points. One is, do they commodify this?
Yeah.
Do organizations commodify? And I would expect corporate organizations to want to do that, because there is obviously incentive, because there is a lot of talent. If you did not know, right, to the rest of the world, you are missing out on talent if you do not attract LGBTQI community.
Absolutely.
And you, depending on the statistics that you want to lean on, there could be up to 50% of the population who are on the
spectrum,
on the spectrum. Yeah, because we are discounting oftentimes bisexuality in the equation. There are a lot of bisexual individuals in the world. So if an organization chooses to not, let's say, I don't want to use the verb commodify in this case, if it does not want to state itself as an ally or make it into a preferred employer situation, then you are potentially losing out on these candidates. And and you can apply this to any enterprise, any institution for that matter, including I'm talking about universities and academia.
Yes.
Right. So why would you want somebody who is potentially equally talented as the Nobel Prize winning researchers that you go around to not want to work with you because they feel that they don't have the space, right? So from that point of view, the organizations do need to do this. And on the other hand, now, when you especially think from a corporate point of view, there is a lot of money to be made in the sense that if you position yourself to be a forward-thinking ally, then that itself is a sort of currency in terms of promoting your brand and marketing and all that. So there is a balance that one needs to strike, and I would say that knowing the company that we've been in for a long time. And I think we are at the right side of the balance equation, where we genuinely care and we want to sort of show what we care about and how we care about different communities, like marginalized communities and etc. And the corporate social responsibility / the commodification of, let's say, this issue is not the reason why we do things, including why we are doing this podcast. Yeah. So So that's a very relevant question. And one last thing before we move on to something about you, maybe is you asked me about not knowing where to talk about issues, right? Let me ask you this: should you care about the platform? And I mean, should we not? I'm also asking the question to me, myself, as well as the rest of the world. See, there is no need for a specific platform to talk about it. You can talk about anything on platforms where anything is being talked about. So what I'm trying to say is that if suppose the biggest conversation platforms currently, I'm assuming it's probably Instagram, and so from a social media point of view, or video sharing application. So that is, so wherever people are talking is where we have to go and talk about the things that we care. So you don't need to sort of box yourself into not knowing where to talk. Instead, just talk and talk sense. And when and for talking sense, you need to know a lot more and be open to information, to knowledge, to conversations like this. And let me just ask our audience, if suppose you relate to what we are talking about right now, please like this and share it with your friends and family and colleagues, and so that we also get a little bit of this type of conversation gets a little bit of, let's say, eyeballs and ear holes, and people start thinking more about it so that they can talk more about it on any platform. So even on the platforms that we hope to have this conversation posted.
Yeah, very valid point. I actually noticed that today I didn't have my pronunciations added in my name on Zoom. And I think that's a really small step, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it takes me hardly any time to do it. It's just that today I had to change my name and I forgot it.
Yeah.
But as a manager, that's something I realized I could do from a position of having a say or getting respected.
Yes.
Like, just in a corporate culture, it's just so important that we don't accidentally marginalize people who are part of the community but not out, let's say. So just using more inclusive language, having pronunciations maintained on your apps or your screens. And now that I'm part of Enago Academy as well, having the right tone and voice in what we put out in the content is so important. I always felt that, academia, because that's where I would say I have the most exposure to people of the community.
Right.
I always felt there was a lot of conversation that was outside of official venues, but not so much within official channels.
Right.
And, in the corporate world, this is some way you can steer the conversation, I guess, in small ways, incremental ways.
Yep. Very much so. One thing about the audience, right? As in the fact that you mentioned that you have to make that effort to make the content be attractive to the audience. That's a baseline for any creative outlet, any form. Even when you're talking, let's say, to your mother, for example, if you do not make your argument concise and sort of graspable from the point of view of the person who you're talking to, then you're likely not doing the best that you can do, and again decreasing the chances of whatever that you want to communicate. And so as communicators, look, we are in the field of academic communications, and we day in day, you and me especially, we talk a lot about how science can be communicated precisely, accurately, and how to grab the audience, because science is a very important thing in 2023, right? I mean, it's always been important, but probably the most important right now, and to for the entire human race. And we are planning to go to Mars. I wanted to go to Mars, for example. I wanted to be on that spaceship, and if we are facing the climate change related aspects, and some of the novels that we talk about just that, and so if it is for us as people in the publishing industry, in the science field, to make it a point to make everybody understand that communication, if you put in a little bit of work in terms of refining your thoughts, that's a lot to do with reading and understanding and comprehending. And then you put the same amount of effort in communicating and refining at the stage of, let's say, writing in the conversation that you brought up, you will obviously have a better impact. And that's how we can all be better advocates, communicators in any platform for any topic. And so one thing I've we've been talking about this podcast for what seems like a month now,
Yes.
yeah, and we couldn't get things around because of several logistical aspects, and that's the reason why we are doing it today. And so let's also sort of place the date, as in we are recording in the middle of October 2023, and this year was the football World Cup, and some of the stories related to academia came up in terms of in Qatar. Academics find it difficult because the Middle East is not a great place to be if you are an LGBTQI scientist. So that's one thing. And there was another story, if you remember, the James Webb Telescope. It's a big sort of name, and I'm a big astronomy guy. And I did not know, and that's why that was a lacuna in my sort of knowledge at that point in time, until the story came up. I believe it was in Nature, that there is a controversy. There is there's a need for the name to be reconsidered, because James Webb, the person, was not quite the most nice guy to in the context of let's say LGBTQI. He was I think openly homophobic, and obviously among several other things. So the name, right? So you mentioned gender pronouns, right? As in what pronouns? I mean, it is just a thing that you can change on a Zoom setting, but that goes a long way in terms of making them think about why it is being done, right? And similarly, when you start questioning about, let's say, the Qatar, if the Middle East is full of money, oil money, right? But at the same time, there are social aspects like LGBTQI rights that needs to be looked at. And so whenever there is a chance, including the James Webb Telescope, so you will find conversations. And when you do think about these kind of things, how does language contribute to sort of moving things forward, right? So there are so then contribute. After framing your thoughts, after reading about, there's so much literature out there to sort of refine your own thought processes and communicate everywhere. That's the way I would say, communicate widely and precisely after reading well. All right.
Yeah.
So I hope you enjoyed that conversation that I had with Gayatri Phadke from the Enago Academy team about inclusivity in academia, the LGBTQIA plus perspective. And so this is one of several such episodes that we have done in the Trinka Podcast. And the Trinka Podcast deals with conversations about the publishing industry, about academia. We also talk about language technology and developments like AI. We have conversations with other leaders from the industry, including data scientists. Apurv Nagwenkar is our lead data scientist, and we had a long conversation with him. We've had conversation with Trinka the person who the Trinka AI app is named after. The Trinka AI is a writing assistant for you. It's specifically catered to academic writing, and that's why we have this podcast, to the Trinka Podcast. Dr. Anupama Kapadia was another guest on our podcast, and she has donned a lot of hats, and she currently works with Enago Life Sciences and Enago Academy. So where can you find us? You can find the video form of the podcast on YouTube, as well as on our website, Trinka AI, and the audio form of the podcast can be found on all major podcasting platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Amazon. We are also on social media, the Trinka Podcast brand. You just search for Trinka AI and you'll find us there. So we are on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter or X as of now, and WeChat and Weibo. So just search for us and drop us a note if you like the content. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to write to us by email, write to us at podcast@trinka.ai, and I promise you that I'll go through each and every email and respond to you. If you like the content, if you like what we talk about, please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and share the content with your friends, family, and colleagues, so that such interesting conversation about, for example, the LGBTQIA plus aspects in academia reach the people who need to listen to such conversation, and it'll help things change. And that's the whole idea of why we have such conversations. And again, on the podcasting platforms, please rate us 5 stars so that the algorithms can push us up. And if you have any suggestions on future topics, please write to us on through any means, I guess on social media or by email or on YouTube comment threads. So once again, on behalf of the entire wonderful team that supports me in creating such content, this is Dr. KK signing off for the Trinka Podcast, academic writing done right. I'll see you in the next one.